to have the sky above my head. When I'm on my bike, I feel complete. It's the life that I want, it's the life that I love. Being in a prison was very hard for me. Poetry was my Valium. My name is Sofiane Sehili. I am 44 years old and I am an ultracyclist. Started riding bikes when I was a kid. I would ride bikes to school and then I would ride bikes to work. I guess I always rode bikes. I tried to get a driver's license when I was 18, but I failed. And so I kept riding bikes. And then I kind of discovered that bikes could bring me further than just to work or to school. I think it was 2010. I went traveling in Southeast Asia. I was just traveling with a backpack, taking buses, trains, tuk-tuks, walking also. And after about a week, I wasn't really too satisfied with this trip, and it's a trip that I had dreamt of for a long time. And so that's when I decided to buy a second-hand bike in a rental shop. I invested $100 in a really beaten up mountain bike, and yeah, it changed my life. I rode it for a few months over there in Southeast Asia, and I think close to 7,000 kilometers, and I never looked back. And then from then on, I just kept riding bikes more and more. After my first ever bike tour in 2010, I tried to get back to like an office job, and I realized that I could not because I needed to be outside. And that's why I became a bike messenger. Because being a bike messenger, I was out there, I was still free. When I took this trip in 2010 with the old mountain bike, I told myself, you know what, someday I will ride all the way across Asia. It was a dream. In 2017, I felt like it was the right time. I decided, to ride across Europe and then Asia. And the same year, Jonas Deichmann set the record for the fastest crossing of the Eurasian continent from Lisbon to Vladivostok. And I heard about that record, obviously, as it happened the same year that I rode from Paris to Taiwan. And I was like, okay, yeah, it's a good idea. I wish I had thought of that because there was not like a huge difference between the mileage that he was doing for his record and the mileage that I was doing for my trip. And that's how the idea got in my head. So it pretty much got in my head as soon as it happened, that record. But then I focused a bit more on the racing sides of things, and I kept delaying the attempt because I just, I was just really into the racing. And then finally, after winning pretty much all of the big races that I had targeted, I felt like it was time to set on that world record attempt.
Bonjour, vous allez bien? Ça va et vous? Bah écoutez, ouais, ça va. J'entends qu'il attend le soleil, mais il attend longtemps, en plus. Je pense qu'il peut attendre plus longtemps. Voilà, on va aller au Maroc, il y en aura un peu. Voilà, c'est ça. Oui, c'est pour moi.
My route doesn't compare to Jonas Deichmann's route at all. We chose completely different routes. The whole planning of this record attempt was quite chaotic. I initially intended to ride through Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, China. So not as many countries as what I ended up doing. But I think maybe 3 weeks before my start date, Israel started bombing Iran, and the country got really dangerous, so I had to change my route. I looked at different possibilities. I looked at maybe trying to go through Belarus and Russia. It was the fastest way, but it was not possible. All the borders between Europe and Belarus and Russia are closed. And then I chose to ride north of the Caspian Sea through the Caucasus, Georgia, Russia, and then Kazakhstan. And I had to get a visa for Russia last minute, which was a bit complicated. But I didn't like sweat the details because I knew that things were very likely to change, and things ended up changing. So it was actually, I think, a good idea to not spend too much time on like one particular road, because I ended up improvising. During the trip, I used the Coros Jura, chosen mainly for its reliability and long battery life. I think initially the first challenge was the heat. I started in Portugal and it was 40 degrees Celsius, quite hot for France in northern Italy. It just got a little bit better as I got in the Balkans. And then, of course, when I got to Central Asia, it was very, very hot again, which was not as challenging because I had adapted. My body was more likely to actually sustain these kind of temperatures. Challenges, of course, were the border crossings. They can be sometimes very complicated, especially in China. I tried to cross the border between Tajikistan and China. There is one checkpoint where you can do that. Ended up being unsuccessful because oftentimes the Chinese don't want you to ride to the border checkpoint. When there's a no man's land, you can ride all the way to the exit of the neighboring country, like you could ride to the Tajik checkpoint. But then there was a no man's land between the Tajik checkpoint and the Chinese checkpoint. And when it's the case, when there's a no man's land, the Chinese don't want you to ride bikes there. And I ended up losing a lot of time. Crossing Russia didn't take long because it was only 800 kilometers around the Caspian Sea, but it was pretty challenging because I couldn't buy a SIM card. I couldn't withdraw money because of the sanctions. I was lucky that I had $200 with me and I changed $100. But again, it was time consuming because you need to find the places where you can actually change the money. They wouldn't change it in the bank. I had to go on the black market, which was an actual market. Again, in Tajikistan, struggled with ATMs a couple times. Once I had to go to the black market again to change money, and then I ran out of actual dollars, and I had to buy cash from other tourists, like by wiring them money. But it's like classic challenges of just like a long trip in remote places. And I also sent myself a package about midway in Kazakhstan, a package with like fresh tires, chain, cassette, just like to make sure that I would be able to ride all the way to the finish on like the parts. And the package never made it. It turned out to be okay for the chain and the cassette, but it was too long of a distance for my tires. So after, I would say, about 10,000 kilometers, I really started struggling with the punctures and stuff like that. It was my third time riding across the entire length of Turkey, and it was the best time. I rode inland in the mountains, and it was absolutely gorgeous. I did love Mongolia. Well, at least the first half, from the Chinese border to Ulaanbaatar. It was so quiet, like huge distances without anything, and pretty scenic, really, really empty and quiet, like really the kind of places that I love. I also really enjoyed going back to the Pamir in Tajikistan. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. I arrived at the first checkpoint that I had targeted. It was the closest checkpoint to Vladivostok, which is why I targeted this. And I was notified by the Chinese military that it was only for Russians and Chinese people. So I couldn't cross there, and I had to try and cross in Swiftenhay to Pogranichny, which was 60 kilometers further north. Problem is that I tried to cross in Dolní Poltavka, I think around 4. So by the time I reached the other checkpoint, it was past closing time. And I lost about half a day waiting for that checkpoint to open in the morning. And the next morning I showed up in Swiftenhay, and there I found out that I was not allowed to cross on a bike or on a bus with the type of visa that I had, which was an electronic visa. You can have 2 types of visa for Russia. You can have a regular visa that is in your passport, or you can have an electronic visa. And my visa was not valid for road border crossing. The only valid crossing that I was eligible for was railroad. And there was only 1 train a day, and the train, by the time that I got to the station, I'd already left. So I tried with bus again, and I was denied again. And so there I was, not far from Vladivostok, about 200 kilometers from Vladivostok, in that Chinese city of Swiftenhay. And I was blocked. There was no way that I could actually legally cross the border on this day. The problem was that if I waited for the next train the next day around 9 a.m., then I would make it to Vladivostok a few hours too late to set a new world record. So after hesitating for a couple of hours on the plan of action, I decided to look for a way to cross to Russia, not through the checkpoint. At first I started riding north, and then the Chinese police turned me back, so I started riding south. I rode along a fence. After a few kilometers, there was no fence anymore. There was just like an alleyway leading to a building. So I tried this. And behind the building was just the forest, and I could like go freely in the forest with no one stopping me. So I started walking through that forest, and I kept walking. I was just making sure that I was going east on my GPS. And after a few hours, I came to a barbed wire fence, and there was a stream. You just had to walk in the stream, and then you could go under the barbed wire fence as well. And after the barbed wire fence, there was this area that was about 100 meters long, where they had chopped down all the trees. So you were really out in the open, and anyone could see you, but no one saw me for some reason. And I just walked through that area, and then I kept walking through the forest until I got to a gravel road that led a train track. And I was in Russia.
I was worried. Almost immediately I went to the police and just say that a cyclist might be missing somewhere in Russia. I'm Fanny Bensussan. I'm Sofiane's partner. I've been racing a few long-distance races the past few years, just decided to stop that, but I'm very familiar with that kind of things, of crazy things, crazy challenges. I've been obviously following Sofiane every single day. We've been talking every day during the record. When he passed the border, the last border between China and Russia, he didn't say anything to me. I think he knew that I would say that was a bad idea to try. And just by the tracker, I knew he was doing something maybe a bit stupid. And then this tracker stopped at some point. I didn't know anything about it, and I heard about him only 2 or 3 days after the tracker stopped. So during those 2 or 3 days, I didn't know what happened at all, and no one knew. So I was just trying to find out, talk to the right persons to try and find information about where he was. After 3 days, the Russian authorities told the French authority that they had a French cyclist called Sofiane Sehili, so they reached out to me. I was afraid he wasn't gonna say anything to anyone if he wasn't feeling good. We didn't talk during the 2 months he was there. When he was brought to the prison, he was able to borrow a phone from one of his inmates and just send me 2 messages via WhatsApp. The only words I heard from him during those 2 months.
After maybe a week or so, I think the mental strength and the resilience that I built through years of ultracycling, that's when it kicked in, and that's what helped me, because I was like, okay, you've been here about a week. All you've been doing was just like stay in your bed and be depressed about the fact that you're locked in a tiny cell. And you're going to be here for at least a month. Maybe you're going to be here for 2. So you can't do that. You need to do something, take back control of your life. And I think that's where it helped me. It helped me because as an ultracyclist, I am used to facing adversity. I am used to go through things that are extremely difficult, and I am used to just fight them with all the strength that my mind is capable of. And so I decided to find some structure in my days. I decided to start writing about this whole record attempt, writing letters to Fanny, to my family. Whoa. I also found out that writing poetry would help me a lot. I decided to take care of myself. Simple things like, washing, shaving regularly, even though I don't really do that outside of prison. For some reason, I would do it in prison. At some point, I had books, which kind of changed my life. Sadly, I didn't have an unlimited amount of books. The first few days of my detention were really, really hard mentally, and then I found the strength just to get over it. After a while, it was very frustrating, like to not understand anything and have no interactions with people. So I tried to learn as much Russian as I could. After about 3 weeks in prison, the consulate got me a dictionary, which really helped a lot. And the first cell that I was in, the guy was not talkative at all. He was not a nice guy. The second cell, there was this definitely nicer kid, which was like, I don't know, 23, 24. He tried to teach me a little bit of Russian, a few words. It helped, learning a little bit more about my cellmates. You do spend 24 hours a day with these people, so you do need to build a relationship. I was incarcerated with several criminals. Some of them were detained for drug dealing. It's a very, very bad idea to deal drugs in Russia. The penalties are very, very hard. You can go to prison for 10 plus years just for a few grams. There were also a few veterans from Ukraine. I'm not sure exactly what they did. There was a guy that was there for corruption, another guy that was there for theft, another guy for assaults, another one for statutory rape, another one for contraband. A kid was probably like 18. He was there for throwing a grenade out of a window, which tells you a little bit about Russia, because we don't really do that in Europe. I think I'm a fairly psychologically stable person. Anxiety is not something that I struggle with. When things were really dark for me, I would just like write poetry and it would help me. And then after about a month of detention, I found out that everything was gonna be okay. That I was gonna be released in a matter of weeks. And I was kind of freed of my anxiety. And from then on, I just could not write poetry anymore. I didn't get the inspiration. It was like I would take my pen and my little notebook and no, I could not write it down. I don't know, it was strange. It was strange. There's a lot of things I missed in prison. A lot. Not seeing bars every time I would look out of a window. Because you can look through the window, but the bars are always there. Having like a nice meal. Sleeping was one of the most difficult things in prison. It's hard to sleep when you're surrounded by criminals. Sleep is always complicated for me. It was very, very hard. And after 50 days in prison, I was as tired as after a really long ultra. I slept so much, I was constantly like exhausted. Staying locked up in a 7 square meter cell with a total stranger who doesn't speak your language. The thing that I missed the most in prison was just being outside. Just being outside. This was like my fantasy. The fantasy of just being outside. It wasn't even cycling. Like if I had a choice between riding a bike in a velodrome or just walking in the park, without a single second of hesitation, I would have gone for the park. Staying there for like 24 hours a day, not ever having the sky above your head. You can actually go through this. I didn't think you could. But when you think about it, people can go through a lot. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I was surprised that I could actually go through this without being like completely destroyed.